Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today. Stop wasting time, hold more productive meetings, hosted by myself, Chris Fitzsimmons, and Biamp. This webinar is, it's about a month old now. I started working on it before the current situation was really obvious. And so this mainly deals with real face-to-face meetings, which hopefully we'll all be having again fairly shortly. For the moment, I hope you're all sitting the recommended distance from anybody else and that you're comfortable. I have obviously modified it. There is a lot of content in here about the current situation and how we can be more productive when we're not in the office and when we're not in meeting rooms. My name is, as I said, Chris Fitzsimmons. I'm the product marketing manager here at Biamp for our conferencing products. That's my face. That's what I look like even when I'm in the office, and when I'm working from home, I look like that too. So I've not really been affected by any dress code changes. One of the rules that I'm going to talk to you about, one of the tips I'm going to talk to you about this morning is always have an agenda for your meeting. So following my own advice, let's talk through what I want to cover this morning. Before we jump into that, just a note, as I said in the chat, we are going to be recording this session. We are recording the session, and that will be distributed as a download link in a follow-up email to this event to anyone that attended. So feel free to review this, share it with your colleagues. It will also find its way onto the Biamp YouTube channel, probably not immediately. That usually takes a day or so for us to render and upload it. So be patient there. But again, if you want to share this with teammates, colleagues, customers, please feel free to do that via the link or via YouTube. The content here is aimed at a broad spectrum of people. This isn't just an integrator webinar. It's not just a sales webinar. This is not just an end customer webinar. We all have meetings. We all can follow some of these best practices and ideas in our daily business. And so if you are an integrator, it's a great opportunity to share some information with your end customers. If you're an end user or a technology manager or an IT manager, hopefully you can share this amongst your peers and encourage them all to follow best practice. So we're going to go through some of the numbers around meetings. The webinar that I'm going to give you here was really born out of some research into meetings and how people feel about them and how well people feel they go and how productive they are and whether people were getting good value for their time. And a surprising variance in the quality of the data available, which is what prompted me to write this. So we're going to talk through the numbers and behavior in meetings. We're going to talk about some tips, how to have more productive meetings. That's really the goal here, is to help you with habits, good ones, bad ones. Obviously, there'll be some time in here with the solution set from Biamp, although that's not the huge focus of this webinar. This is hopefully a little lightweight, a little interesting, a little fun. And then there'll be time for questions. If you do have a question, please use the questions box. I will answer them at the end, unless there's something obvious that people have misunderstood during the flow of the webinar, at which point I may address one, but generally I'll be saving 10 or so minutes at the end of this time slot to address questions from the question box. So I encourage you to use that. Without further ado, let's get on. So how many meetings do we have? Or how many meetings are held? Now, I apologize. A lot of my data is based in the United States, but this really is just to give us some context around what we're talking about here. So research that I reviewed suggests that somewhere between 40 and 55 million meetings take place every day in the United States. And so if we follow the rule of thumb that that's about a third to a half of the world's business, then we're looking at 100 million meetings every day worldwide. That's a lot of meetings. What does that little one mean at the end here? At the end of these slides is a page which has got all my sources on. So any statistics I'm quoting here, any numbers, I've actually provided references so you can go look it up and review the stuff yourself. That means 188 million individual meeting experiences in the US. What's an individual meeting experience? It's kind of like a person hour. So one person in a meeting is a meeting experience. That also means there's 188 million opportunities for a good or bad meeting experience. And we'll see how often that occurs in a minute. So that nets out to 163 billion minutes on conference calls in the US and the UK. Now that figure is more than 2 weeks old, which means that it is a complete understatement of the situation. Goodness knows what the number of billion minutes conference calls are now occurring, because we're all having conference calls all the time. I would imagine it may even have another zero on the end of it at this point. So we have a lot of meetings. We have spent a lot of time in meetings. A lot of resources are expended preparing for and conducting meetings. But are they any good? It's an important question. And lots of people have attempted to answer this question for various reasons, mainly because they're interested in selling meeting products. There is a popular view that meetings are bad in general, that they're either bad to have or they are bad when they occur. And there's sort of commonly available research in tech blogs and online that says that 50% of meetings are actually unproductive. There are, dozens of blog posts, there are articles in various highbrow publications, there are infographics, there's all kinds of things there to tell you that meetings are bad or that they're held badly. But as I said, most of them are published by or on behalf of companies that make meeting solutions. So the obvious agenda here is, oh, hey, your meetings are bad, but hey, I've got a solution for you. It's a bit like what I'm about to do. But the point is, when you look at this data, it's really important to kind of poke about under the hood a little bit and understand why or where these numbers come from, because they're not always well written or well researched. And one of the biggest problems we see is that the question asked is in some way leading or prejudiced towards a particular answer. So you'll often see a question like, how bad is your meeting, or how bad are your meetings? And then the range of options available to the responder is somewhere between very bad and extremely bad. But the supposition is it's bad. There's no opportunity to express a positive experience. But one company actually did some very, very good research. That was Verizon Wireless. Prasad, if you're having audio problems, I suggest leaving and rejoining the session. The audio is being recorded. If anybody else is experiencing an audio problem, please let me know in the questions. I believe my mic is working correctly at the minute, so I'm going to carry on. Yeah, so Verizon did some research, and they took a very scientific approach. So they asked a great question. They asked, what percentage of meetings is productive? So they didn't say, oh, meetings are bad or meetings are good. They say, what percentage of them do you feel to be productive? And this wasn't just their own employees. This was a range of business partners and other users of technology. So these were the results. They found that 66% of the respondents were generally very happy. They were either extremely or very productive. And then only 7% said not productive. So that's not it's not really aligned with this 50% figure that has been thrown around. This is a really decent piece of research. The shame of it is that it's actually a little bit long in the tooth now. I think it's about 15 years old, but it's a good method. It is a good set of questions. So I don't think things will have moved too far. So why do we feel they're so bad? Why is there this 50% figure? What is it based on? And so the most commonly expressed sentiment about meetings isn't really about the meeting, it's about the time. They are a waste of my time is a commonly expressed comment from people who are asked about meetings. So what does that mean? Why do they waste time? People often feel the meetings they're in are unnecessary, or they're unproductive, or they're ineffective. And so what I wanted to do is poke a little bit about, at that, those expressions of ineffectivity or of unnecessary. So let's ask, when you have a meeting, when you're arranging a meeting, the first question anyone should be asking themselves is your meeting actually necessary? And I don't think we do that enough. I think there's an awful lot of meeting for the sake of it. And some of that, I believe, comes from status meetings, and that's a lot of the research kind of lines up with that. Around a third of a US worker's week is spent in a status meeting. And that's really just a meeting to tell somebody else what you've already done or are planning to do. And half of workers spend that amount of time again preparing themselves for such meetings. So that means that not only are you spending a third of your time in a status meeting, half of workers are also spending another third of their time getting ready for the next one, which leaves a third of their time to do actual work to report in the status meeting, which is pretty egregious. And 3/4 of workers report that they multitask during such meetings. So that means they're not paying attention to the meeting, they're not paying attention to their colleagues, they're potentially not engaged in any important points. They're doing other stuff. I'm sure you have some ideas about what that other stuff is. I'm sure you're all guilty of this. I'm guilty of it. So here's a couple of things, a list of things that people have responded when asked, what do you do in those meetings? So eating food, watching TV. I'm sure that's getting more and more common these days. Joining another call, that's a new one. I hadn't thought about that. Responding to work, emails, or even personal emails. Using one of our many UC platforms to make comments to each other about the meeting itself. That's a common one I've seen. And yes, people actually do hold meetings from the bathroom. And for those that are interested, 12%, which is a pretty shockingly high number of people said they had been in the bathroom while attending a meeting. So I don't know. So first tip, have less status meetings. There are so many tools out there today to track project status. All of them are better than sitting in a meeting telling each other what you just did. Biamp uses Jira, we use Microsoft Project. There are many other platforms, paid and free, out there to help with that. And if you do want to have a status meeting, if you are running an agile development schema or something like that, have a stand-up meeting. All of the research says that stand-up meetings are fantastic for engagement. They're fantastic for keeping it on the point because everyone's a little uncomfortable. They're all standing up. It helps with the body posture and the energy of a person to be engaged. So have a stand-up meeting. Lots of companies are doing this now. It's a really popular method of keeping it sweet, keeping it on point, and moving on and being respectful of people's time. So avoid wasting people's time. Be respectful of their time. That's the first thing. What about in the meeting? What do people feel like is bad in a meeting? And again, this is from some of the Verizon research, so the language around these questions is a little bit maybe dated sounding, but it's probably still true. And the top 3 things that people came up with were, firstly, video conferences with poor reception, by which I take to mean poor image quality. Seems reasonable, 86%. And so these people were given a list of irritants and asked to pick their top 3, which is why these numbers are fairly close together. Second, conference calls with bad audio reception is what I take this to mean, poor audio quality. So very close to video, but more important. But what's interesting to me is the most significant irritant is neither quality of video nor quality of audio, but it is the fact that the meeting was either poorly organized or ineffective. As I said, this is from Verizon, and the question was, what are your causes of a bad meeting ranked by how irritated you are by it? So not the quality of the call, but the preparation or the organization of the meeting was actually the most irritating thing to people. So what does ineffective mean when people ask this question? The first thing that can make a meeting ineffective is this idea of a lack of a clear goal or an agenda. So the idea that if there is no agenda, it feeds the psychology of the pointless meeting, and it starts to create that negative mindset for attendees. If they don't know why they're there, they don't know what they're doing, they're going to come in with the idea, well, this is pointless, why am I here? And so there's some research done on how often sorry, skip too far. How often employees left meetings with a clear understanding of what to do next? So how often was the meeting effective? How often did we take a bunch of people's time down and then they knew what they were supposed to do? So all of the time, only 10%, most of the time, 45%. And that leaves, nearly 50% of the time where people don't really know what they were meant to do next. That's not really a great meeting, is it? I mean, obviously they may have spent too much time emailing or watching TV or making trips to the bathroom and not paid attention, but really with an agenda, everybody knows when there's a goal, everybody knows what the goal is, and therefore everybody knows when the meeting is finished, which means it could be finished early. If you get through your agenda and you've got 10 minutes left, you can all go. If you don't have an agenda, you don't know when you're done. So always have an agenda. Having a clear outcome for a meeting means it can finish. but it also helps an organizer decide who needs to be there. That means that you can be, again, respectful of people's time. If I need to make a decision, I know what the decision to be made is. I should know who the people are that I need to arrive at that conclusion without then having to have another meeting with somebody else who wasn't there to get their opinion. Lots of companies now enforce this idea of a no agenda, no meeting rule. Intel's a high profile example. You don't have to attend a meeting at Intel if it doesn't have an agenda. You are within your rights to say, nope, not coming. I've been known to ask for one at Biamp if there isn't one, but it's just good practice. It's good meeting hygiene to have an agenda. So what else can we do in meetings? What else impacts productivity? More people, more attendees means less productivity. This quote is, I think, one of the favorite things I found doing this piece of research, which is that if a team cannot be fed with 2 pizzas, then it's too big. It's Jeff Bezos. Whether he actually said that or not, it's attributed to him, and it was an excuse for a nice picture of a pizza. But what this really means is that in a bigger meeting with more people in it, the contributions of any one individual are diluted. There's much more risk that someone's voice is not heard for whatever reason if there are more people trying to be heard, trying to take part. Obviously, in a given amount of time, the more people there are, the less time can be devoted to any one contributor, so the fewer chances they have to be heard. But also there's this comfort zone that occurs when you're in a room full of people, and that is this idea that you're going to coast. So, okay, Tom, Dick, and Harry are here. I don't have to say much, so I'm not going to contribute because I feel like everybody else is talking enough and I don't need to. Or I'm shy and I don't like big groups of people. Or I can hide behind someone else. I'm not going to be asked to talk. And people who are in that mindset of coasting are not engaged. And so they're going to be conducting one of these other activities that we just listed, right? We have a whole list of things they will probably be doing instead of being attention. And that means that they are wasting their time, right? This is now a waste of their time because they're not producing. So tip 3, don't create this picture. Only invite who you need. Be respectful of people's time. And what that means is when you do invite the people you need, you get the most out of them. But equally, don't under-invite. Don't prevent a conclusion by missing out important stakeholders. Now, of course, this is much easier if you have an agenda. Now, as I said up front, this set of slides was written before we really understood COVID and what was going on. I was actually in New York City for the AV user group the week before it really hit the headlines in the States in the beginning of March, before we were all quarantined. But so I've modified this to add some additional content. So this is the working from home edition. And really the takeaway for this part is that the rules here are the same. And if anything, they got much more important than they were when you were all in the office. Being respectful of people's time, having an agenda is just 20 times more important when you're dealing with remote work and people working at home. Your meeting still probably isn't necessary if we're in that 30% of status. And the reason for that is that the bar for having the meeting should be higher at this moment. If we're all working at home and we're all trying to work around our families, then the bar for do I need to have a meeting with 6 people just got 6 foot higher, okay? Meetings are even harder at home. There are family needs. I don't know about how you guys are all working, but my kid's out of school. He is getting homeschooling work to do. That needs supervision, that needs attention. My wife's also working at home, so everyone is trying to get on with what they have to do, and you need to be respectful of that. Privacy is a challenge, right? Not everybody has the luxury of a home office or a space in their house. I'm using the den in an open plan building. Some people are working off their kitchen table, some people are working out of a bedroom, some people are working out of a living room. So private space is at a premium. And not everyone is blessed with technology that supports this kind of meeting. When I ran this webinar last week, or attempted to, my home wireless router decided to die on me mid-call. And that's just a function of it being a non-professional piece of equipment. So all of these things make having meetings more challenging. And just because you're working at home, it doesn't mean you should be booking more team meetings just to touch base. That's not how this works. Touching base is a personal activity, not an excuse to book a status meeting. right? If you actually want to know how someone's doing, don't ask them how much work they've done. Ask them how they're doing. So if you want to touch base with team members, hold a personal one-on-one call or organize fun activities with the team. I was delighted on LinkedIn last week to see that one of the distributors in the UK had organized a team baking session on Zoom. I thought that was brilliant, and I'm planning to steal the idea for the marketing team here at Biamp. I think it's a great fun opportunity to talk to each other without making it work. If you do have a meeting, you still need to have an agenda, right? You still need to be respectful of people's time and plan that session for a couple of reasons other than the ones we already talked about. The first one is that actually having distractions at home, which exist, for example, I have a cat here that wants to play with my keyboard, that makes staying on track even harder. So the agenda is even more important. And an agenda forces people to pay attention, and it also gives permission. It also gives people permission not to attend. Right? You can invite someone with an agenda, and they can look and they go, you know what? I don't believe I need to be here, and they can let you know that. So only invite who you need. Triply important in this situation. Now, this next section isn't based on research other than my own. I have worked at home before. I've been doing it again in a crash course for the last 3 weeks. So here are my tips for working at home. Schedule. Have an agenda for yourself. That means try to start at the same time every day, finish at the same time every day, make space for breaks, do all the things you would do in the office, get a coffee, go for a walk, keep yourself sane. The cat doesn't want to go away, excuse me. Think of the kids. Make time for them too. If you don't, it'll only cause you problems. I'm not trying to be cold, but if you don't pay attention, if you're not present, you will just have upset kids who are probably going to create problems for you. Stay in contact. Just because you're not having a status meeting with your team, it doesn't mean you shouldn't be chatting with them and talking to them and engaging with them in, you know, whatever way you can on whatever platform you're using, whether that's Teams or Zoom or Skype or email. Just keep in touch with people, touch base. Have an office. That doesn't mean build one. It means find a space in your house or your workspace that is going to be your workspace. And the reason for that is it means when you're working, you know where you are, and when you're done working, you can hopefully leave that space and feel like you're finished. If you have a dedicated workspace, you can have a dedicated not workspace. And that's a really important psychological trick for successful remote working. When I was working at home for Biamp, which I did for about 16 months, I actually ended up renting a spare desk in an office down the street because working from my living room wasn't helping. It wasn't conducive to me being productive, and it wasn't conducive to me feeling like I'd finished work. So have a space that is one that you call the workspace, and have fun. You know, you're getting potentially more time to spend with your family, your loved ones, whoever that is, and enjoy that time. You know, enjoy the fact that you can look over it and see what your kid's doing or whoever else significant other is doing. But most of all, be patient. It's very easy to get frustrated when you're under each other's toes. Try not to do that. Be patient with your family, be patient with your colleagues, because they're all going through the same thing you are. So let's talk about calls from home. Actually, I'll take Neville's question. Neville Bounds has asked, do you think the current lockdown will change the way companies approach meetings? I don't know, Neville. I think what my opinion is that companies will become more accepting of working from home as a valid method of people being productive. I don't mean they're going to close all their offices and everyone's going to work from home, although that might seem attractive to some businesses because I'm sure it's saving a lot of money. I saw some outrageous figure of a major London bank saving, tens of millions of dollars a week on not having any employees in the building. So I don't think there'll be fewer face-to-face meetings when they're necessary. I think there'll be more working at home when people can. So let's talk about some tips for having a call from home. Obviously, first step, decide if it's necessary. Sensing a theme here. Do I need to have this call? If you are going to have a call, anyone that was attending last week can chuckle. Test your setup. Check that your sound is good. Check that your headset worked at home and is behaving itself. Check that your camera's giving a picture if you need to use your camera. check your internet connection. Most people at home do not have pro-grade internet. Lots of people use Wi-Fi. Lots of people are sharing the Wi-Fi with 4 other people who are wanting to watch YouTube, Netflix, or maybe have other conference calls. So think about that. If you can use a wired connection, use a wired connection. Just give yourself the best chance of success. Place your camera carefully. What does that mean? A really smart piece of advice I read in the New York Times last week, which was to make sure that your camera's pointing at a wall, not a thoroughfare. So don't set yourself up for people to walk behind you, or for the cat to jump over it, or for whatever to go on, or the bathroom door. Just point it at a blank wall, point it at a picture, pointing at the window. Just keep it sensible. And mute by default, right? All these meetings have got tons of people in. Everyone's at home, no one's thinking straight. There are kids in the background. There are all kinds of noises. There was somebody watching the TV, or there's traffic or whatever. Just mute your mic. And if you need to speak, unmute it. And if you finish speaking, mute it again. It's just common sense. Set boundaries. What does that mean? If you can, close the door, put a sign on the door, put a sign on the bathroom, wherever that says, "Hey, I'm in a meeting," and just let your family know that you are on a call. It's not always possible to tell, especially if everyone's got headsets on and you're just kind of waving frantically at each other across the office. Someone asks you a question or wanders up. If they're not aware of a call, it's just a distraction. So even if it's a big red light on your desk that says "on air," do something. So we've talked about kind of personal behaviors and whether we're at home or in the office, but what else makes meetings effective or ineffective? There are some other things that go into it. It's not just about whether there was an agenda or not. Starting late is one of the biggest ways to kill the effectivity of a meeting. If an hour-long meeting starts just 5 minutes late, there's nearly 10% of its productive time gone. So not only are you wasting time, but actually being late is frustrating for attendees that are ready to go. So if you show up on time and your colleague does not, you already start with this resentment of, "Oh God, John's late again." So don't do that. Don't create the psychology of, "Oh, why are we here? This guy's always late." Try to keep it on track. So why do late starts happen? Well, late starts happen when people are late. They happen when meetings run over before because they were late. But also technology can be late. What do I mean by that? Well, it just means that the technology is not ready to go. So it doesn't work, or it's hard to use, or whatever, but technology can be late as well. And actually, technology-linked problems generally cause not just frustration, but actual stress. Actually get stressed about technology in meetings if it doesn't work. You've all seen people's faces go funny colors when they can't get the laptop to connect, or they can't find the share button in Teams, or they run out of battery, or whatever it is. Actually, if you're trying to do a challenging meeting, if you're trying to make a point, or you're trying to get an important decision made, the last thing you want is a technology problem, because that feels like, well, this isn't my fault and I'm still being set up to fail. So it's not surprising then that technology has a huge impact on meetings, right? Great technology can make a good meeting really, really good. Right? You can really get it right. It'll sing. It'll really help you make your point. If you've got a great display and great sound, everybody's understood, fantastic. The converse is also true. A bad technical setup will make a bad meeting awful. So a meeting without an agenda that started late and has crappy technology is, a nosedive. So some numbers around this. Some research was done on conference calls and general meetings. And in the average 38-minute call, which is apparently the average length of a conference call, we spend 8 minutes getting started. We waste 13 minutes on distractions. Now that's all of the things that I listed earlier, TV, bathroom breaks, cats, children, talking to each other, reading email, and we actually end up with about 17 meetings of productive time. So that's under half in an average conference call. That's pretty shocking, right? And as AV professionals, we're responsible for the first 8 most of the time. Technology-related stuff accounts for 7 of the first 21 minutes. So of that orange and red region, we're responsible for nearly half of it, a third of it, in fact. And that's a big problem, right? Because people have expectations of technology. They expect technology to solve their problems. They expect it to make things better. And 83% of workers they depend on technology in the first place. It's not expectation, it's entitlement. and a majority believe that access to the right tech will actually make their lives better. They are believers in the power of technology. And because people are believers in the power of technology, that's why bad technology makes people so upset, right? Because they're basically having their dreams crushed. They think, oh, technology, this is going to be good. So when technology is bad or doesn't work well, they're kind of doubly disappointed. So let's talk about some solutions, talk about how that could be improved. We talked about who to invite. Inviting the right technology is just as important as inviting the right people. And what do I mean by that? Thinking about the technologies that can help. Some people were asked in a number of different pieces of research what technologies they felt would help make their meetings more effective. So this isn't a outcome-based research. This is what people hoped or felt like would make their meeting experiences better. So these shouldn't be news to anyone, right? These are all the basics of conference room technology and collaboration technology today. They want people want tech that works simply at the touch of a button. They believe wireless technologies are better. They believe that sharing from any device is important. The ease of use, easy remote conferences is important. But layer that belief and expectation on top of the fact that 2 of our top 3 irritations were also tech related. So that those set of pie charts I shared earlier, we said, hey, poor audio quality is 88% of people's biggest frustration, and 86% of people's biggest frustration was video quality. So they have this belief up top here that these techs are going to help them, and then there's this challenge underneath that they're not delivering, or that when they go bad, it's a big bugbear. So let's kind of break down some of this. Getting started on time. That is hopefully going away, right? But figuring out how to get going, how to start a meeting is a UX problem, it's a user experience problem. And most of our major UC vendors now have a solution for a one-button start. So the kind of the guidestone of the UI designed for Teams rooms, I know at least was a 1-second meeting start. I know Zoom is doing the same. This idea there's a big button that says go and everyone can see it, and it's not possible to be confused. So that's generally getting fixed, or has been fixed by the UC vendors. And I think that's one of the biggest advantages of these unified room solutions now, is that they are in control of the UI and they have the budget to do good user experience research. The challenge now is not starting, it's getting stuff done once you've got going. And so sharing content is a gripe. We still hear a lot at Biamp. Even within the established platforms, figuring out which window I'm going to share through Teams is a challenge, right? I click on the little box with the arrow in it, and then I'm presented with every single window on my computer, and it's not always immediately obvious which one I want. It's a big problem. Actually, I'm going to take that one too. Sandra made a really good point there. Be aware of time zones when setting up a meeting, and I'm guilty of this as someone who sits in the States working for a US company with a ton of international colleagues. When you book a meeting, think about what time it is, where people you expect to attend are going to be. Great point. Thanks, Sandra. But back to our challenges. So sharing content and connecting your own device. So connecting the BYOD device that you brought with you to the session is a challenge, right? We all have a plethora of connectors. There's never the right connector in the room, this kind of mess. So how do we deal with getting your team with a diverse range of devices all to plug into the same meeting room? And what about when there's no call? Lots of meeting rooms now, based on UC platforms, kind of presuppose that there is actually a UC call set up. But if you just want to walk into a meeting room and you haven't booked a Teams call or a Zoom call, how do you use the tech if there's no call? Sometimes these rooms don't have good ways to engage, so that's a challenge as well. And so this is really a segue into one particular technology solution for Biamp. As you know, in February, Biamp announced an acquisition. We joined ourselves to HRT, who are now part of the group, and they have a fantastic family of products called Huddle Hub, which are focused on wireless meetings. And I wanted to talk about this, but wireless meetings are one way that people believe that technology will be better for them. And I want to talk through some of how Huddle Hubs address this. So they have two products in field, or we have two products in field right now called the Huddle Hub 1 and the Huddle Hub 1 Plus. I'm not going to go too much into the ins and outs of these things. I'm really going to talk about the concept of how they might fit into your huddle room or your meeting room. There's a lot of detail available from Huddle Hub on how these things work and all their ports and connectors. That's not the point of this webinar. That's all available on their website, which we'll have at the end. But let's talk about how these things fit into a typical kind of huddle room, huddle space. So today, in the typical BYOD huddle room, we have these three core components, right? There's two things that live in the space. There's a display and there's some AV equipment of some kind. And then typically an attendee, a meeting attendee or a worker is going to bring in their compute device, in this case, a laptop. And so first question, how do we wire this all up? Well, today that's done in the wired huddle room, right? So we have HDMI for display, we have USB for the equipment. That's the typical way of doing this. Fine. And then there are kind of, lots of connector problems with this. How do I make sure I'm connected to the display? How do I have the right connector? Oh, my laptop's got a USB-C or blah, 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 blah. There's all kinds of fun. And so there have been attempts to solve this in various ways. The first of which obviously is just, providing a plethora of connectors. And then more recently, we've seen kind of wireless dongles and other accessories that have attempted to make this a bit easier. But they still involve plugging things into other things, right? You still have to have the right shaped plug for the right shaped spigot on your compute device. And so what the Huddle Hub line does is take away the wires. So with HRT or the Huddle Hub 1 and 1 Plus, you connect all your existing equipment to their device or our device, and then you connect wirelessly from your compute or your laptop, whatever you're bringing with you, to the peripherals in the room. So when I walk into a space that's equipped with a Huddle Hub and my laptop, I don't have to plug anything in because it's already done. I'm literally using a wireless USB driver in my laptop, and we'll talk about that in a minute, to connect to the Huddle Hub, and then it's exposing all of those devices to me. So that gives me two things I can do. I can gain access to peripherals, USB equipment wirelessly, so I can use a webcam or a microphone that might be in there, or a Devio, for example, right? As an example of a USB device that I can now get hold of wirelessly. So if I just want to have a call, I can do that. But if I want to have a meeting and I want to share wirelessly, I can also do that. So I'm getting wireless content sharing and wireless peripherals at the same time. And the upshot of that is you no longer need to directly cable your compute device, right? So there's now no need to have the right dongle, and I can get access to my USB devices or whatever I want. And as I said, that AV equipment could actually be Devio. So typically, let's get this animation back. That AV equipment there is going to encompass maybe audio output, microphone, a webcam. It's going to be hubbed through. And Devio can still do that, right? Devio has multiple HDMI ports. Multiple USB ports. It is a USB hub. And so you can connect, obviously the Devio provides the audio side of it, and then you can connect a webcam to Devio, plug it into the Huddle Hub, and it's available to somebody coming in with a laptop. Francois is asking, can the USB device be USB 3? Yes, it can. That's absolutely not a problem. The caveat to that is that USB 3 has high bandwidth capabilities, and I'm not sure whether or not Huddle Hub would support like a 4K webcam or something like that. I'd have to check, Francois. So I'll take your question and I'll respond directly, or we'll have someone respond to you directly via an email to clarify exactly the capability there. Julio from HRT Huddle Hub is on. He's telling me that no 4K cameras, so thanks for that clarification. Now, obviously, all you do there is plugging devices into the back of the Huddle Hub. So plug in the USB cable of your AV equipment into the Huddle Hub USB port, whether that's a Devio, whether it's just a microphone or whatever it is. But you can actually use a standard USB hub in front of multiple devices. So this USB cable here could come from a hub, not just from an individual device. Once you've done that, you're off to the races. So how does it work on the compute side? Essentially, whatever soft codec you're using on your laptop or your device is going to give you the option to choose USB devices, right? So you can choose, if you had multiple audio outputs on your laptop. You can choose which one you want. All you're going to do is choose Huddle Hub from your list of devices. So you're going to choose the Huddle Hub virtual drivers for microphone, for speaker, and for camera devices. And then that's how your computer then uses the Huddle Hub to connect and gain access wirelessly to all of those bits and pieces. So it's very, very simple. Like I said, I'm not going to get into the ins and outs of room design. That's for another day. There's plenty more webinars to come from Biamp in the next month or two as we're all continuing to work and train remotely. So there'll be more detail on that. If you do have any questions and you want more technical info, it's available from the Huddle Hub website. So that's hrt.website. Our friends in Italy are ready and waiting to take questions. Other than that, thank you very much. My email address is on this last slide here. So if you have anything else, please ask. I'm going to cut this off now. So thank you all very much for attending. I hope you found it useful and fun a little bit. I know it's a little bit difficult to stay sane right now. We're all restricted from doing what we would normally do. So the goal here was to be informative, but also keep it lighthearted. Thank you very much indeed, and I'll no doubt be speaking to some of you again on another webinar in the near future. Thank you.